Hello, good morning, everyone, at least for me, me and Dali. We are back for another Street Epistemology review show, a kind of special episode. Today we have Steve, Dali, and William. What's up, you guys? How's it going?
All right.
Going good?
Yeah. So, Steve, want to give some context about what we're doing today?
Yeah, I noticed a few videos on the street epistemology. I'm not a street epistemologist. I should get that on the table. I'm just a regular person. But I just came across a few videos on YouTube, and I think I posted a couple of comments underneath one or two of them. And I think Dali got back to me, or a couple of people got back to me. I think maybe William, maybe. So there was a little bit of a to and fro on the comments, and there was a little bit of a discussion, I think you would say, which was poking at what is the kind of underlying question was, what is this thing called street epistemology? Because I know that you guys have been debating this internally recently, and I've also noticed that there's a bit of a discussion around the fact that it's changed since it started. And I'm quite interested, coming to this quite new, in what this thing is. And I think Dali, you invited me on so that I could actually just put some questions to you guys. And I would just remind everybody, I'm not a street epistemologist. So even though it sounds like I'm setting up an SE conversation, I'm actually never done it before, and I'm not trying to do it, but there may be a bit of a crossover in my approach, only because that's naturally what I would do. And funnily enough, that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in your movement, because I noticed a lot of things that I think are probably good things to do in conversation. So, but they also see there's some contradiction, but perhaps in some of the things I've heard about what it is. So I'd like to try and get to the bottom of that. So we're going to do that by watching a few examples or a few videos that I've picked out, and then we're going to just perhaps have a little bit of a chat about each one. But we'll do them in pairs. I picked out a few videos in pairs, and I purposely picked videos that will push questions to the limits of what it could be. So I'll leave it at that. We'll just start. I think the first two videos aren't SE conversations. Is that right?
The first one is not an SE conversation. This is Peter Boccioni addressing the Imagine No. 3 Religion Conference back in 2013, 9 years ago.
2355, is that right, Dali?
Yes.
Out there. Give it a moment to upload. Thanks, StreamYard.
Look at that font. How street is that font? That font is so street.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, we've never had a controversy about fonts.
Not yet.
I'm aware. Anyway.
Is it doing that thing where you press play and then it just doesn't play for like 5 minutes? I had that for a while.
Let's go over your backup Chrome tab, Dali.
I got it. Share screen. Chrome tab. Bang. Share.
Play. Okay. Those were the 9 strategies that you can begin using to conduct your own epistemological interventions. Let's briefly review those. Meet people where they are. We talk about stages of change. The goal is to help move people from one stage of change right on down the line to the next stage. Develop non-adversarial relationships. We talked about the importance of tone. We talked about the importance of words. Reconceptualize faith as a virus. This will also help you in your interventions because you're less likely to become upset, irritated, frustrated, angry. Then we went over a series of suggested prohibitions. Target faith, not God. Target faith, not religion. Target faith, not politics. In the pre-contemplative stage, avoid facts. Always bring the focus back to epistemology. Interesting. How does someone know that? How could someone know that? And finally, divorce belief from morality. All right. Those were the 9 strategies. I'm going to leave with some final thoughts, and I'm going to walk you through some interventions.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All righty.
Yeah,
we'll watch. Should we watch the second one and then talk about both?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll try the second video here.
Go ahead.
And that starts at 1:45. That works. Okay. 1:45. Okay.
Oh no. On that, but that I think is the perspective we want to try and take in. Yeah, I've got one big question, which I think is pretty much the question most of us are probably thinking about when we watch this. I've seen the video, and my question really, and I think it will persist throughout the video, is this street epistemology? That's the question. And my view, just put my cards on the table, is I don't think it is. And I would be really interested to know whether Peter Boghossian thought that this was what street epistemology is. And I slightly suspect that I don't know that he would classify this as SE or whether he has classified this as SE. So it may be slightly uncharitable, perhaps, seeing it through an SE lens, because it may not be an attempt to demonstrate street epistemology as such. But for anybody who doesn't know, Peter Boghossian obviously is the author of A Manual for Creating Atheists. And it was in that book that the term street epistemology was coined. And so he is the father. I think I referred to him as the grandfather of street epistemology. Peter, Anthony. There's a sort of Trinity narrative that I'm trying to avoid. But yes, it's something like this. So yeah, that's my thought. And yeah, interested in hearing what you guys think. Good.
Well, I haven't seen it. I think it is street epistemology. So I guess I'll take the opposing.
I think it goes one more minute.
In there.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think that there's a sliding
I specifically
scale.
avoided seeing it, so
Yeah. Okay.
I could see it fresh today.
Same here. Yeah.
Awesome.
Probably a sliding scale of like street epistemology to not street epistemology, and it's somewhere on that scale. Yeah, we'll definitely probably have a lot more to say about it once we get rolling with it.
One question. Oh, sorry, Lisa.
Sorry. I have this sitting right in front of me. It's the 10 basic steps of street epistemology that I use in my meetup group.
Okay.
And I give this to people when they first come. This is taken like directly from the website. So if you go by these basic steps, it's probably not qualified as street epistemology.
Right.
There you go.
Cool.
Cool.
All right.
Yes, good selection there. That summarizes the conflict well.
Can I just start by giving you an outsider's view? So, and correct anything that I say that isn't accurate. I understand that street epistemology started with Peter Boghossian's book in 2013, A Manual for Creating Atheists. That's right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was when it was coined as a phrase, as a thing. And the first clip was Peter I think just around that time, I believe, doing a talk. I think around the time that the book was either being written or had just been published. So that gives you an insight into what he was doing. And also somebody, if you want, could read that. I think the first page of his book has a sort of definition of what it is. You could read that out maybe. But what I'm interested in is how it's changed since then, because apparently the way I perceive it is that it's now something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to know what it is now that's different from what it was when it started.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to do at the beginning is talk about. I thought it was really interesting when you described in your introduction, you described SE as a movement, and I think you're right about that. I think there are different aspects of what we tried to define in SE. One of the things that I've been keen to point out when I've been trying to work out for myself what the definition of SE is what is it actually that we're trying to define. And I think there are actually, when we talk about street epistemology, we can be referring to, I think, one of three things. And this is just my take on this, and I'd be genuinely intrigued to hear what you guys think. But so my view here is that we're either defining the objective of street epistemology, what change is street epistemology trying to have in the world, or we're trying to define the method of street epistemology. What tools are we bringing to bear to achieve this objective? And then the third thing is street epistemology, the movement, the kind of community, the bringing people together, trying to learn and figure it out. And, you know, what is street epistemology doing as a community, as a movement? And I think the definition of all three of those things can be very different. And I would imagine also that they are likely to all independently change within each other. The most important one, I think we probably would agree, is what is the objective of street epistemology? And I think that when Peter wrote A Manual for Creating Atheists, he was doing it explicitly in response to the sort of a sort of stumbling of the new atheist movement. There was Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, Christopher Hitchens were sort of taking the debating scene by storm. There was a rise of what they were referring to as new atheism. And then sadly, Christopher Hitchens passed in 2011. And as a result of that, it seems that there was a huge sort of lull. We'd lost the sort of charismatic figurehead of this sort of new atheist uprising, this sort of movement that was occurring. And I think that explicitly, if I recall correctly, in A Manual for Creating Atheists, Peter Boghossian talks about the fact that there isn't going to be a new Hitchens. What instead he's envisaging is an uprising of street epistemologists. Everybody's going to become a sort of micro Hitchens, if you like. What a horrible concept. And we're going to sort of come together and push forward. So I think Peter Boghossian's view seemed very much to be about building a catalyst for and inspiring a groundswell of interest in a new sort of new atheism movement. Atheism was very much at the heart, I think, of A Manual for Creating Atheists. Obviously, it's right there in the title, but it's also right there in the text. He explicitly talks about talking people out of their faith. And we heard echoes of that in that initial clip where he was talking about faith, rather sort of uncharitably, to say the least. Targeting faith, I think, is what he referred to it as in that presentation, which seems disagreeable now. And that's one of the things I think that has massively changed. I think the objective of street epistemology is not to convert people to atheism. I think it's about encouraging people to think for themselves and reflect on their epistemology. And I think a lot of people who are atheists in this movement think that that's enough. That's actually a really great tool to bring you to whatever position is most rational. And obviously, if you're an atheist, you believe atheism is the most rational position. So you'd imagine that if you were to inspire somebody to critically and honestly reflect on their epistemology, and they were to do so meaningfully, they would likely come to your position. But if it's not a rational position, if atheism is irrational, street epistemology would not be effective at encouraging them to move to atheism. It would be encouraging to, in theory, for them to move to whatever is the most rational position. So yeah, those are my opening thoughts. Can I
get, do you mind if I get Reid's opinion on what he thinks it is now? How would he define it?
Sure
Reid.
thing. I'm part of the street epistemology course team, and we've been working for like over two years on this thing. And a part of the course is there's module 1, what is street epistemology, and at the end of that there's criticisms of street epistemology. And the first one is SES atheist evangelism, and we've kind of broken it down to like the time periods of when that might be accurate. I think from 2013 to 2014, right after the book came out, we were saying this is mostly true, that SE was atheist evangelism. And then from 2015 to 2016, partly true, partly false. But then after 2017, mostly false because of how it's changed over the years. And that's mainly from the opening up of the topics from religion to supernatural stuff more broadly, skepticism focused stuff, to politics now and social issues, to anything really now. So yeah, it's changed a bit, but we're still focusing on, even back then it was focused on the quality of our reasoning and epistemology and not so much on the changing of the beliefs. At least that's how it was framed in the book. But, you know, a large segment of the atheist activist movement still picked up the book and had their own intentions of trying to cause doubt in believers out there in the world and creating atheists. So I think that's fair. But now it's kind of broadened out.
Now we have people trying to create vegans.
Yeah.
That's all good too. It pretty much though, the definition of the definition that we're talking about is whether we're just addressing epistemology or whether we're trying to convince somebody toward or away from their own claim. And I think that we've mostly gotten away from arguing anybody's claim. And now we're just talking about the underlying epistemology, because I think we get more effect that way. And we also get a better result, because if all I do is convince you to my argument, I've not grown at all. I've got no opportunity. If I get you to explore your epistemology, I have a real good chance of changing my own mind. I do change my mind 5-10% of the time.
Dali, can I get you to,
Sure.
I kind of understand everything you've all said, but if I was coming to this without having seen any SE, I still wouldn't know what it was, because we're kind of talking around it. We're sort of, I can pick out what you're saying, but
Sure.
we still haven't said what it is. Like, what actually is it? If you just had to put it in a sales pitch or just a nutshell, just tell me what it is.
Yeah,
someone who doesn't know.
epistemology is where I have a conversation with people, or we have, but I'll just speak for myself, where I have a conversation with people and ask them to take an example claim. Whatever claim doesn't really matter, because when they explain the reasons for the claim, they will get down to illuminating the epistemologies. Now, just for clarity, epistemologies is the study of how we come to know things or how we come to believe things. And I see two columns. I see qualifying epistemologies, like, oh, this person has a PhD, so maybe they know a thing, or this thing was accurately measured and I like the way they did their studies, so I will positively believe. And then there's negative epistemologies, like, well, this person's a jerk, so I don't want to listen to them, or this person was wrong about this other thing, so I'll get rid of them as an authority. So we have both positive and negative epistemologies, and those are the things that I'm looking to validate or invalidate. And it's not whether they fit my epistemology about the thing. It's when they bring it up and they talk it out, suddenly people will, that's maybe not a good reason. So then they adjust their epistemologies. And under normal circumstances, because people will take a topic and then just start arguing the topic back and forth, they will completely let go of how they got to it, and they will just be arguing their position, defending their position, and they get nowhere, because then they won't even review the epistemologies.
Okay, so it's about trying to. Would you say this is fair? Would it be respectfully challenging people's epistemology, or respectfully challenging their reasons for their beliefs?
Yeah, my personal definition is, and it is just my personal one that I've been working on, chipping away at. Street epistemology is the act of respectfully encouraging others to honestly and critically reflect on the reasons they think something is true. That's it. We're just encouraging others just to do that. Take a moment and reflect on something that they're convinced is true and they think is true, and we help them do that in a critical thinking sort of way.
I've got a list of really quick fire questions, which are pretty much yes or no. Right, let's just see if we can get a consensus on these, and then we can go on to the next videos. Okay, is it SE if is the beginning of every single question? Cool. All right, so is it SE if you don't start by building rapport?
Can be.
It can be.
I would say
you may not need to start if rapport is already there.
Okay.
For me, SE is a pass-fail for rapport at the end.
Okay.
Would they be interested in having further conversation? That means I was successful in it. If they aren't, that means I was unsuccessful.
Okay. Is it SE if the SEer suggests the claim? The person, the street epistemologist.
Yeah,
can
be.
So you don't always have to ask your conversation partner for the claim.
I can invite a specific claim.
Okay.
Yes.
So it can still be.
I can't get in the way, yeah.
Okay. Is it SE if you don't check the strength of their claim?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Strength of their claim or the reasoning?
The strength of the reasons for their belief.
Oh.
You know, on a scale.
When you say check, do you mean ask them to say how?
Them.
asking them.
The scale thing that you do.
The confidence scale?
Yeah, the confidence scale is, you could do SE without the confidence scale.
You don't have to do that.
Yeah, not required.
Dr. Tyrone Wells recommends getting rid of the scale entirely. So
interesting.
He does good SE, so yes.
This is something I really wanted to clarify because I think this is really important. For me, this is the difference between the objective of street epistemology and the current practice of street epistemology. So the objective of street epistemology, the thing we're trying to achieve is to get somebody to respectfully and honestly, we are respectfully trying to get somebody else to honestly and critically reflect on the reasons they think something is true. Now, what we also have in pursuing that objective is a series of tools and methods that have been developed by lots of people. Anthony, someone came from a manual from Creating Atheists, others have come from all kinds of different worlds. And these tools, these methods that we use are not the thing that we're trying to do. We've just discovered that they're effective sort of in getting us where we want to go. And so, the confidence scale is a useful tool, and some people find it more useful and some people don't. Building rapport, opening the conversation by building rapport, it's a great way to start the conversation because it makes sure that that's a respectful conversation right from the get-go. But it's not necessary. If I've respectfully encouraged somebody to honestly and critically reflect on what they think is true, then I've achieved the goal of street epistemology, regardless of whether I've used any of these tools in the toolbox.
Let's fire through these really quickly then. And you can just say, quick answers. Is it SE if you don't challenge someone's epistemology?
No.
And let me clarify that. Challenge means asking questions that might elicit a contradiction in their thinking, or say using an outsider test or a thought experiment. In other words, is it SE if all you do is ask them about a belief and their epistemology, but you don't actually challenge anything? So you just come away from the conversation having not challenged anything, but you just got them to speak about it. Is that SE?
It can be, because sometimes merely actually having to articulate what it is that they think, put it into words, actually encourages them to have to reflect on it. Sometimes just when you even just ask them for the definition of the words that they're using, that just so that you understand what they're saying, that alone can force them to think, well, what do I mean by that? What does it actually mean? I use this word all the time. What do I mean when I say it? That alone could invoke that challenge. So I don't think you'd have to necessarily push very hard at the challenged, or I think, and sometimes just asking those kinds of initial questions can be enough.
And is it SE if you don't notice any pause to think or aporia?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
absolutely.
We can't force that.
The goal is that reflection, but sometimes we don't get it.
So you can be doing SE but just not achieve it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You could be trying to do SE, but if you've not encouraged somebody to critically reflect on their reasons, then you've not achieved that goal.
But it's still SE.
It's still SE. Well, you're attempting SE. So like I can attempt to use medicine to make you better, but that medicine might not actually cure you. And therefore I've tried to do something, but failed to achieve it. I think it's possibly in that vein.
And is it SE if the person gets defensive?
I think it would be a sign that you've lost rapport, but you could still be doing SE for sure. And I think, I think when you ask anybody about their views, I think it's possible for them to become defensive just automatically. Some views are just walled gardens in people's minds emotionally.
Am I following the recipe if the cake gets burnt? Am I baking a cake if it gets burnt? Yes, not well.
Okay. We're nearly finished. Is it SE if you reveal your position without them asking for it?
Yes, and it goes against the rules of basic SE. I spent most of my time when I was teaching SE doing the very basic stuff, and at which point we have really bright lines, like stay completely neutral and things like that. And then you see advanced SE, and I'm just going to call that the Pine Creek version. Because Pine Creek's been out there so much, there's no way he can be neutral in the sense of hiding it. Everybody already knows all of his positions. And he manages to make that rapport positive most of the time, in spite of them already knowing.
And I was going to ask,
Agree,
who decides what SE is, but let's leave that for now. I think we should.
I do. I've just decided that that's me. Finally, we've figured that out.
I think we should watch the next two videos and then.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right, I'll try to get those queued up. We'll try that. video file 3. And what is the time code for this?
Yeah, I limited the little
720.
720. There.
try to focus on a question around this. I think we started with the question, is anyone born in the wrong body? And then we moved to like talking about this book about a body. What's the question we should be focused on for this conversation?
What does it mean? What does it mean to have a body in this society?
What does it mean to have a body in this society?
Yeah.
Okay. What are a few answers to this question that we could evaluate?
I think it's definitely a huge. I feel like it's an umbrella topic, being that the body is something we can all relate to, and yet also I think are always learning more about, and that body differences, any way you want to put that intersectionally, is kind of the root of, I feel like, a lot of our social political climates of loving or not loving the differences in certain bodies because of the way they look, the religion, the country, their chosen sexual orientation or gender. That all of this is, we're all talking about the body the whole time, which I find is, I don't know, so interesting. And it's something that I think it's a different way to put it than putting, than maybe using some other verbiage around it. It's something that we can all innately relate to.
Okay, there's a lot of the strife in society comes down to how we view certain bodies, and it comes down to the body and how we view it.
And then how we look at ourselves, of course.
And how we look at ourselves compared to like the standards that are out there. And gotcha. So the question was, what is it that, what was the question? What does
it mean to have a body?
Yeah, and the response, what's it? Let's see. It's about just being. What is a good answer to that, Uncle Leonard?
I don't know. I don't know what a good answer to it really is, but I do think it's an important, more than the answer, it's an important question to be asking, and to come up with two different reflections on those topics, because I think it can mean something different for every body and every person, and yet it, like I was saying, I think at the beginning, it's something both macro and micro, that it can be it can be over talking about human race as a whole, and then also our own personal, very specific journeys of living in a body.
Spans a lot, yeah, from macro to micro. Gotcha. Sweet. Well, we try to be here Tuesdays and Fridays. If you're on the way back from work at any time and you see us.
Yeah, I'll definitely stop by again. Where can I find your stuff online?
I've got a card over there. I'm on Twitch and my social media. He's on his YouTube.
Thank you.
And we'd love to pick up this conversation, or potentially you could talk about something else. That'd be really great.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you. Great to meet you guys.
Nice meeting you.
And I'll check it out for sure.
Perfect. Thank you.
In you and all the like.
And here's the next video, about 4 minutes.
Comprehend that certain things are really evil. That Hitler, for example, did evil things. I know that I believe.
What? Hang on. You think Hitler did evil things?
Do you not?
No, I do. But why do you? How do you know that?
Why do you think that?
How?
No. What do you?
Because it goes against my standard.
Oh, but why? But his standard was, I want to kill all the Jews. So
yeah, but it goes against my standard.
Right. So, but there's no real, actual right or wrong.
Now, why do you think
in your world?
Now, why do you think what Hitler did is wrong?
because it violates an objective moral standard.
How do you know that?
Doesn't matter.
Hang on, I'm going to ask an epistemic question. How do you know that what Hitler did goes against your standard?
So to this, I would say I would appeal to the inevitable knowledge, the innate knowledge that we all have about whether or not. So what I'm trying to do is actually illustrate or identify that you do indeed have this same knowledge about what is objectively.
Or are you
right
saying
or
it just feels wrong? Is that what you're saying?
It's not about feeling; it's a knowledge.
How did you come to knowledge?
And
How did you come to the knowledge that what Hitler did was wrong? Let's say killing 20 million Jews.
Without in order to answer that, let me ask you a first
No,
question.
answer my question. How did you come to the knowledge that? How did you come to the knowledge that killing 20 million Jews is wrong?
You seem to think that there are nothing that can be known to be objectively true is unless it is scientifically proven, right? I'm saying that there are many things that are in our life. There are many things that can be known to be true that are rational.
I'm asking
claims.
how. How did you come to believe? How do you know that it's wrong for what Hitler did was wrong?
I know it in the same way that I know that the objective world is real. I can't prove that.
Okay, now let me ask you this. What if God, for morally sufficient reasons, wanted 20 million Jews to die?
For morally sufficient reasons, it would be whether, so, he could do whatever he wants to do.
No.
What is true is that if he did that, you would have no grounds to say, oh, he shouldn't have done that.
Okay, so how do you know that's not the case, that God wanted 20 million Jews to die for morally sufficient reasons? How do you know that's not the case?
How do I know it's not the case? I know that he is this. I know that he's the standard for what is right and wrong.
But how do you know that what Hitler did was wrong? If God wanted it, it would be right.
Well, if God wanted it, it would be right. No, it's not about whether he wants it and that makes it right.
He decreed it.
It's not about his moral standard is not ultimately rooted in his declaration, but his very character.
His character wanted it.
This is an impossibility. You're talking about a world.
Really?
Impossible. We can talk.
It's impossible for God to want 20 million people to die?
Yes, it's impossible by definition.
Did God flood the earth?
Yes.
Did God want all those people to die?
He wanted to, yes.
So God can have morally sufficient reasons to kill 20 million people.
You think those are the same things?
And that's that clip. Okay.
So I find that kind of thing very entertaining.
Now, I'm not making claims that both of those conversations were doing a street epistemology, but I kind of think that they come from the background of street epistemology. What I'd like to find out is whether you think one of those conversations was more correctly street epistemology than the other one, and why. And I'd like to just have a very quick answer from each of you, rather than one of you take it on. So just go around, all of you.
In basic SE, I would score the first one about bodily, what bodies mean, as much more open to question, and the second one from Pine Creek as very much more argumentative. And so in basic SE, I would score the second one well down.
I would say I would lean no for both of them.
Yeah, that's probably where I would go. I think that second conversation with Pine Creek, and I think this is something that I think is quite important when we talk about what SE is and it isn't, or when it is or is not SE. I think to a certain extent, Pine Creek is having this conversation for the sake of the audience as much as he is the sake of the person he's speaking to. And I think that makes a huge difference to whether I think personally that it's SE. I think what he's trying to have that conversation with that person. I don't think he's trying to be dishonest necessarily. I don't think he's trying to, but he cares more, I think, that the show is entertaining, that he's enjoying the conversation, and that his audience is entertained, whilst also maintaining a sense of being honest and true to his own beliefs and views. That to me is what massively changes it from what I would consider SE to not SE. Whereas if I could say the locus of the conversation is in the audience or in the street epistemologist, I would say that it's not SE. If the locus of the conversation is the person you're speaking to, then I think that makes it SE.
Can I ask a question, William? Would you say that it's possible that what you've just said is subjective?
Absolutely. Hugely so, yeah.
Is it possible that Pine Creek would have had that conversation in exactly the same way if the camera wasn't on him?
It's certainly possible, yeah. I would say I'd say it's quite likely, but the dynamic in that other conversation is also not just that Pine Creek has the audience in mind, but also the conversation partner has the audience in mind as well. That person called into a show with an audience, knowing what Pine Creek's show is. And so even the conversation partner is not necessarily looking there to openly reflect and genuinely question. They're there to champion their cause. And I think to a certain extent that massively changes the dynamic. If you think about the context of Reid's interview, there was a person who was just passing it in the park who sat down to have a conversation with somebody. Hey, what's this? Like certainly the person sitting down didn't come to the park with an agenda that day. And Reid's openness was reflecting of the openness of his conversation partner. And I think to a certain extent, Pine Creek's tone and approach reflects the tone and approach of the people that join his show.
And again, I'm just going to ask a question to be a devil's advocate, if you like.
Yeah.
If someone walks along in a park and they saw Reid with a microphone, and I think it's true that Reid would have asked his permission and explained that he was going to be streaming. Is it possible that a person that would agree to do that would also be aware of an audience?
For sure, yeah.
So can we really say that there's any difference between the setup in the sense that they're both aware, both all people involved of both of those conversations are aware that there's an audience?
I think the majority of people that go on Pine Creek's show are already familiar with Pine Creek and his tone, and the majority of people that sit down at the park are not. I do note that about a fourth of the people that sit down at, say, at Runyon Canyon are stuck on transmit, and they just want to address the audience. And address the audience.
There's a real survivorship bias problem here, though, which is that we only see the SE that's conducted under the conditions of having a camera there or a stream present, right? We don't see the conversations that don't happen when those things aren't present. So there is a real problem, I think, with the optics of that, which is that people then equate street epistemology with filming a live interview with somebody on the street in some way. And that's not the objective. As again, if we look at the objective of SE, which is to encourage somebody to respectfully and critically reflect on why they think something is true, you can do that in a conversation with your parents, your mum. You could go out on the street and talk to somebody, whether you've got a GoPro attached to you or not. Then you're still doing SE, I think. But of course, the only ones we ever see, there's a camera present.
Can I ask a question to everyone?
Sure.
Are you aware of any videos of conversations, of SE conversations, which were recorded without consent, and then the consent was obtained at the end, and they didn't even know it was being filmed? So you basically have a candid camera, like you have a hidden camera, you engage someone, you go through an SC conversation, you record it, and then you tell them at the end, oh, I was recording it, and you admit that you were recording it, and then you ask for their consent.
I'm not aware of anything like that, and that would very much go against at least the way I've taught it.
I'm not suggesting that that's something ethical to do. I'm not saying it would have been streamed. I'm not saying it would have been streamed live. What I'm asking is,
post. I'm not aware of any.
So you're not actually going to put it online unless they agree.
I'm not
it's-
even going to record unless I have the intention to ask their permission up front. Now, I
Yeah.
have sometimes failed to ask permission, but the microphones and the cameras are obvious, and it's just me failing to follow the format. And then I hopefully have at least asked permission before the end.
I only asked that question because it was interesting that you pointed out that all of the things that we've ever seen have been where people are aware that they're being filmed. But you can anecdotally tell us, I'm sure, that you've had conversations. You can describe how they went, and I do.
Yeah.
I think, so how do you feel about the conversations that weren't being filmed compared to the ones that were? And do you think there's a difference?
So I would be skeptical about how important. I think the difference, predominantly the difference, isn't just that it's being filmed in terms of the Pine Creek versus the gentleman in the park. I think the key difference is the gentleman that called into the Pine Creek call, he knowingly did that, knowing what Pine Creek show is like, knowing the topic he wanted to bring, knowing who Pine Creek was and how he was likely to engage with the subject. All of that context was very present. And in the park, even though, there's I'm recording that, is this okay? I'm really not sure how much of an impact that has on the nature of the conversation. I think one of the things that I think is hugely impactful, though, is having a conversation with somebody you do not know. Like it's the conversation with a stranger that inexplicably, or at least, I found it surprising. When you're having a conversation with a stranger, somebody you don't know and who has no impact on your social dynamics, your society, their view of who you are as a person doesn't matter to you, and you're going to walk away and you never have to see them again. Having a conversation in that context where you don't know who they are and you can just be very, very honest. It's a kind of remarkable thing, actually, that you can be completely honest with a stranger in the way you might not be being able to be honest with people that you know in your family, your friendship, and your social groups. So I think that probably has more of a bearing on the nature of the conversation than the presence of the cameras and that it's being recorded.
Can I ask? Can I use those two videos that we just watched to ask a question about what the goals were in each case, and whether they align with the goals of what you think the goals are of SE more generally?
What was your goal, Reid?
Yeah, that was a claim that I had on my board, a list full of topics to talk about. I think that exact question was on the board, and I do want to encourage a thoughtful conversation about that topic because I think there's potential negative consequences people can go down and cause a lot of, as they say, irreversible damage if they get that question wrong sometimes for some people. So that's a harm I want to avoid in society. And I wanted that conversation out there. And I wanted to model a way to have the conversation for other people to copy.
Reid, did you feel that it went well, that conversation?
I don't remember it too well, but of the one I saw there, that bit, I don't think we even got past the clarifying of the definition stage. I didn't even get to the reasons or the quality of their reasons. So I wanted to keep the conversation going, but at that point it was probably already 20 minutes or so, and offered to continue some of the time.
Do you think that it didn't really get off the ground then? You said you kind of started and the rapport was there, but
I tried to ask clarifying questions for the what of the claim, but it was just spinning wheels by the end there.
And contrasting that, if you look at the Pine Creek one, they did get into the meat of something.
I could speculate, but I'd have to ask Doug what his intention was, and my speculation is that Doug was trying to make the point that the morality was subjective, in opposition to his guest asserting that it was objective.
I agree with that. I think going back to the goal, though, we can say that Pine Creek was trying to convince the caller that perhaps he had his epistemology wrong. We had bad ideas for his beliefs. Would that be fair?
I think he was trying to certainly point out the contrast of where the different worldviews would you logically conclude, right? Like, I don't know if he was trying to convince the person he was speaking to, or whether he was just trying to demonstrate why his perspective is more effective in explaining the world.
Do you
I'm sure
think
they-
that? Can I last question on these two?
Yeah.
Really, is do you think that both of those conversations were at least attempting SE, if not achieving the goals of it? Or would you say there's different reasons why they both weren't? Because Reid, you said they both weren't SE, those clips.
Yeah, my first one, I was attempting it, but I didn't achieve it because I didn't get to the reasons or the quality. I might have inspired a little bit of reflection, but that's not sufficient. And for Doug, I think his main goal is first entertaining himself, entertaining the audience, and then inducing some kind of cognitive dissonance in the guy, mainly for entertainment. So,
Yeah, I think that's right. Nice. You tried it, but didn't necessarily succeed. Pine Creek wasn't trying it, but might have been quite effective.
I think he succeeded at his goals, Doug.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I had
Doug,
to whip it out.
if you're
Yeah.
watching this, please tell me, were you attempting SE in that moment?
I think what I'm trying to find out as someone from the outside of this is that I can see when I hear street epistemology, the term, I'm hearing that the street part of it is to do with not being something academic or not being something professional. It's the street. I don't see street as being on the street, literally. I see street as normal people, every regular people.
That's
right.
its meaning.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And then the epistemology bit is about trying to find out the reasons for people's beliefs, right?
The quality of
Now,
the reasons to justify their confidence
Yeah.
in the claim. Yeah.
Now, at that very broad level, there's kind of that is kind of going on in both of those conversations that we just saw to different levels
Yeah.
of success. Would you say that was true?
Yeah. Here's a mental model that I think might be useful because I found it quite useful. And I think that you could create a poster campaign that achieves street epistemology. You could create a leaflet that was constructed in such a way that it was honest, it was respectful, and it encouraged somebody to critically reflect on the reasons they believed something. That leaflet would be doing street epistemology. And I think that's a useful idea because that way we can separate the method from the objective. And the method is, there are lots of methods, and I would say that, like, and actually, you know what, we look at that Pine Creek video. I don't know whether that gentleman was honestly reflecting on the problems with his position, or whether he was just assuming that Doug was just an uncharitable atheist arsehole and was just sort of, just putting all that on him, and was just getting annoyed at his own inability to seem like he was winning the argument. Maybe he was reflecting. If he was reflecting, then SE had been achieved. If he wasn't reflecting, then SE hadn't been achieved. And as is often the case, I think, with SE conversations, it's not always obvious, I think, when it's been effective. It's very, very difficult to measure its efficacy.
Yeah. Can I point out what I think is a little bit of a contradiction here in the definition? At least the thing that I've got a problem with is that I can't work out if SE is a method or if SE is an outcome.
It's
To me,
Take an
to-
outcome. The recipe?
this is, I absolutely have to separate it. And this is just my personal view, but my view is that it's an objective, and that objective is to encourage that critical reflection. The objective is to try to achieve this, and the objective has been successful if that has occurred, if somebody has critically reflected. And if it's not a method, because a method is just a currently prescribed way of getting to that goal. You could do all of the steps in a standard SE conversation. You could move through them systematically and deliver them. And if the person that you're speaking to hasn't at all critically reflected on the reasons they believe what they believe, then you've failed to meet the objective. And you could do none of the steps. And as I think Doug was probably not doing very many of the steps there, and still be effective. So yeah.
Just to kind of develop this a little bit. Let's use the analogy of a doctor.
Yep.
If a doctor attempts to treat a patient, but isn't able to diagnose or cure the patient, are they still being a doctor?
Yeah, they've attempted medicine, but they failed to save their patient. They failed to keep them healthy.
So whether or not the outcome isn't the thing that dictates whether that's a doctor or not. It's what they're doing, right?
That's correct.
Right.
I would say there's a method and a goal. at least one
Right.
primary goal.
Because I just want to use the straight analogy to street epistemologist. If a doctor is a doctor, whether or not the patient is cured, is a street epistemologist still a street epistemologist if the conversation partner doesn't do the things that you said in your goals? Doesn't.
So a street epistemologist is somebody who's attempting to achieve that goal, like regularly induce this effect in other people. Essentially, that's what a street epistemologist is. But we need to separate the doctor from the medicine, right? Medicine's objective is to make people well. Doctors are trained to understand the methods and practices of medicine that have been understood to be effective in achieving the goal of medicine.
Right.
So
there are certain things that a doctor does, which is within the realms of being a doctor. What are those things in the equivalent things as a street epistemologist? What are those things that make you a street epistemologist?
Yeah, so that would be the current practice of street epistemology. So that's usually the steps of rapport building. It's usually asking open questions, checking definitions, these kinds of steps that we would have in a standard SE practice session. Asking the questions, identifying the claim, identifying what the reasons for the claim, what the reasons that support the claim are, and how those claims, how can we know that those reasons are justifiably supporting the claim itself, and the Socratic method, basically.
So that makes sense to me as a definition of what a street epistemologist is. At least it makes sense to me when you use the doctor analogy, right? Because you've got a strategy for trying to make people reflect on their epistemology, right?
So in my interview with Anthony, I talked to him about this, and I've used this example before, and I said if it could be proven that a certain form of meditation practice, and I deliberately chose meditation because it has this sort of new agey vibe to it, if it could be demonstrated that a certain form of meditation practice was demonstrably more effective at inducing critical reflection on people's epistemology than the current methods and models that we use in SE, would street epistemology be promoting the meditation practice or the existing methods that we understand today? And he said we would be promoting the meditation. And that's exactly how I feel about it as well. I totally agree with that answer, and I think that's exactly right. The methods are just the way we currently believe is the most effective way of achieving the objective. And just as in medicine, it used to be that you wouldn't want to go back 100 years and attempt the best medicine that they had at the time. You would be much more benefited by having modern medicine, even though that medicine is dramatically different. So the medical practice can change, and I really hope the practice of street epistemology changes to become increasingly more effective at inducing the effect that it wants to have in the world. I think it's really important, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, because I think a lot of people get this very confused, and I think it sort of gets in the way of a lot of things.
Can I just put another point to you though? What's wrong with let's say that this meditation worked and achieved the goals better than the other techniques?
Yep.
Would there be anything wrong with just saying, well, then we just leave street epistemology behind and we move on to another thing, this meditation thing? Why bring the name along and just call the meditation street epistemology? Why not just say, we're just going to do this new thing?
The name would not make sense if that became the new method. Yeah.
Because I'm confused. Because William, I'm not confused by what you're trying to do. I'm confused by your definition of SE, because I'm seeing it as the way you're describing it is it can be anything that you mold it into, that as long as it's achieving goal X. And I'm just confused by that, because I thought a street epistemology was a particular way to achieve goal X, but you seem to be saying that it's any way that you could achieve goal.
Yeah, no, I that's exactly what I think, and again, I think the analogy of medicine is really good here, right? Like doctors do not practice the medicine of 100 years ago, and yet they are still doctors, and they are still practicing medicine, are they not? And I think that's very much how I see street epistemology, and I still think the name would work personally, because it's still non-academic. analysis of people, people reflecting on why people believe what they believe, the reasons why they believe what they believe. So I think that the name, I think the objective is the most important thing here, because then how do we know what tools we should include in our tool set? How do we know what is better or worse medicine? We can't know it by how well you've applied it. You could do trepanning, the old, drilling holes in people's heads to alleviate headaches. We could practice that perfectly. We could be so good at the practice of trepanning, and we still, by modern standards, would be doing terrible harm to our patients and wouldn't want to do this as medicine. So we have to measure the tools that we use against the objective. We ask the confidence scale as a great example, because that's a very clear example. We always often open up the questions with a confidence scale. So why do we do that? Well, we do that because currently there's a belief that it's a useful part of the conversational framework that allows us to have a more effective goal in achieving a more effective conversation that achieves our goal. But if it could be demonstrated that actually that gets in the way in some way, or people find that actually cumbersome, or maybe there's a more elegant way of doing it, let's throw it out. I don't care. I don't want to be using a confidence scale if it's not going to help me achieve the goal. So how do we know whether the confidence scale is good or a new way is better? Well, we would know it because it was more able at achieving the goal, just like medicine is better at making patients well. Yeah.
Can I push you a bit further with another thought experiment?
Absolutely.
Instead of it being a method of meditation, let's say someone invented a drug you could take.
Yeah, I did this one as well. Same thing.
And it had the effect that the effect you wanted to achieve with street epistemology. Is that now street epistemology, that drug?
In my view, yeah. If you could give somebody a drug to make them understand geography better, then that drug would be a better way of teaching geography than the current method of teaching geography. So sure, if you had a magic pill that was able to encourage people to reflect on their epistemologies, I would say that was achieving the goal of street epistemology. Yeah.
Can you remind me in really, really brief nutshell terms, what is the goal we're referring to here?
So my definition of the goal is street epistemology is the act of respectfully encouraging others to honestly and critically reflect on the reasons why they believe something is true.
Everyone agree with that?
Reflection is also part of the
goal.
The goal, yeah.
So
honestly and critically reflect, yeah.
So you want people to critically reflect on their epistemology.
Why they think something is true, yeah.
And you think that street epistemology could be any way of getting people to do that?
Yep. Like I said, poster campaign meditation, I would still say that was still street epistemology. Or it's, whether the name becomes obsolete over a period of time, maybe we've talked about the fact that names in many ways gets in the way. Yeah. There's the word street, which is to indicate non-academic, followed by a very academic word that most people don't use. So it seems self-contradictory even in its own terms. So, if somebody wants to invent a new name for this thing, then I'm all for it. I called my channel Inspire Reflection because I felt that that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And I think but I mean, the name is as good as any, I think, at the moment.
And one last question. I just want to push the boundaries of what we're talking about here.
Can I comment on the drug thing real quick?
Yeah, of course.
I think one of the main outcomes I want, once people do potentially reflect on the quality of their reasoning and then potentially improve it, I want them to be able to then think for themselves when they come across claims in the real world, and they have a kind of self-defense tool set to evaluate claims, so they're not, at the whims of marketing or some kind of
charisma,
malevolent force out there. So it's like that's an effect I want to help create in the world. And if it was a pill, then it's not thinking for themselves, like you could run out of the pill and then you're back to square one and you're at risk of being manipulated. So that's what I thought. Think about that.
Yeah. Now, somehow the pill just put you in a state to really do good critical thinking. Well, if you have the example of critical thinking and that inoculates you against believing things for bad ideas, you did it. You're done.
Yeah. Now we need to understand how this magic pill works. Is it making you feel like?
Yeah. Or you could build it into genetic modification of humans. Say.
Wow.
Wow. Are people genetically
so then you wouldn't need to do any street epistemology because it's already been done.
I can't imagine what that would even look like. The
but
word
just-
dystopia springs to mind.
I just want to push I just want to push a little bit further and try and test
Sure.
your definition, because as far as I understand it, street epistemology came along as a better way to get people to reflect than debate, because as far as I understand it, the earlier kind of new atheists were using debate as their tool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, very much so.
Can I just
ridicule.
give you a thought experiment now? Imagine
Mm-hmm.
that they worked out a way of testing the result of conversations, and you could gauge how successfully people were reflecting. And they did a big experiment. They got a lot of people involved, and they did a lot of different ways of doing it. Some ways they used the SE way, and then some ways they used debating. Okay, and let's just say, this is a completely imaginary thing, but let's say the debating got more people to reflect. So in fact, even though we thought, or you thought, because I'm not a street epistemologist, you thought that you were doing something to help people reflect, but in fact, the thing that you were trying to move away from actually was even better at doing that. And you just found out there was some trial done, and you got the results. How would you feel then about the definition of SE?
Yeah, I think that if a debate could be shown to en masse encourage people to honestly and critically reflect on the reasons why they think is something is true, then I would be very supportive of that debate approach. Like to me, it's about achieving that goal. I want more people to believe things for good reasons, and whatever you believe, whether if you're a Christian or you're an atheist, or if you're a flat earther or you're a QAnon member, whatever it is you believe, everybody thinks they think things for good reasons. And everybody's aware of somebody that they think is wrong about something. And that person, it's that old adage, being wrong feels exactly like being right. And so one of the cool things about SE is it encourages people to take a moment and try to do that reflection and trying to unpack what you believe to figure out whether or not maybe something you're believing isn't quite right. And that's not me judging you. And that's one of the great things about the current practice of SE is it's not me making that judgment about whether what you think is right or wrong. It's me encouraging you to make that judgment, for you to use your own thinking tools and your own analysis to make that judgment on your own beliefs and choose to whether or not you want to change them or alter them or be more confident in them. So if debate was effective at doing that, bring it on.
But would it be called SE? Would you then redefine SE as being debate?
I'm not sure.
People can believe things for bad reasons. I'm not going to debate someone I'm not going to debate someone who already believes a thing that I believe to the same degree of confidence. But I would just see someone to make sure they have quality reasons for their confidence in what I believe.
I think you've uncovered an interesting point there, which maybe, I don't know if you already mentioned it, but as part of the definition of what SE is, seems to me that it's more about testing people's epistemology, even whatever it is that they believe, and you can agree with them or not. Whereas in a debate, you can't really do that. Well, you can if you could take it on the opposing side, though, can't you?
You could steel man or straw man or an opposing view.
There's definitely devil's advocacy in a debate situation.
Yeah,
right. There's a strong overlap.
Okay. Should we watch the next two videos?
Sure. 5, I think, and then start time 16.
16, yeah.
Anthony.
I know that clipboard.
Yep.
And we've done things, but there's nothing that's going to change my mind to make me go that way.
Let's say that this guy, let's say that this guy elaborates and says, not only do I pray to Vishnu, but it's my deeply held belief. I actually know my God exists, and one of the things he tells me is that interracial relationships are wrong, and we should stone people who do that. Now, I don't think people, I'm using extreme, I'm touching you. Sorry, he's a touchable guy. I know that's an extreme position, but
Yeah.
I'm trying
I
to
understand what you're
I'm trying to pick something to really shine a light on your position that seems like you're saying is that I'm okay with people believing things that are not true.
To answer your question, he would have to do it directly to me.
You would wait until he's harming you personally.
Not harming me. I mean, till I can see that he's harming me or others in his belief.
Let's say he said he's actually done this 3 times.
Oh man, I'd have a serious problem with him.
Now that was an
and
extreme.
his belief.
This was an extreme example.
Yeah, I understand.
But in light of this discussion, we're kind of scouting out your belief here a little bit. Do you think it's wise generally for people to be fast on a belief and unwilling to change their position for any reason whatsoever?
Not for any reason. If someone's gonna
Sorry, that was a clumsy question.
if someone's gonna change their belief, it might be something very significant that would cause them to make a change. Like the example you gave. I believe he has a right to light his incense or do whatever he wants to do. I don't think he has a right to stone nobody, And,
Draw some lines. We got to draw some lines somewhere,
and
right?
definitely not, ain't gonna be no stone in here. I stone back. So that's just me.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. Though.
Have you ever thought about what it would take to change your mind?
No, but you're gonna have me thinking about it. I'm sure by the end of the day.
But see, I also think it's growth. Just like if you look, in whatever the religion is, with Christianity, with little kids, God is kind of like Santa Claus. They pray for things they want. It's
well,
not.
No
and
Santa
then
Claus
as
in my neighborhood, so.
Well, stop. And then as you grow up, so your beliefs do change and they alter as you grow. So.
But Anthony.
I guess fundamentally, what I'm interested in is, are the
go
beliefs
away completely?
Well, no, but are the beliefs that we're holding really true? Are they real?
If it could be explained, you wouldn't need faith.
You're using faith to be certain your belief is real.
Yes. If it could be explained, there wouldn't be no need for faith.
If that guy who believes in Vishnu and has strong feelings on interracial relationships,
faith,
and he's using faith to be sure his God exists, would he be justified in that position?
No. Not if he's going to stone people. He can believe what he wants to believe. I give everybody that freedom, but not freedom to attack someone or violently hurt somebody.
Yet he thinks faith is a reliable way to conclude that these things are true.
He's probably wrong. Just like maybe you think I'm wrong, but that's okay.
I try to really keep my views
I
out of it, honestly. Hey, I held you up far too
I'm
long.
gonna stretch a little bit.
Go stretch,
and
man.
then we got to go.
All right, nice talking to you.
Good.
All right, that's one clip.
I don't think that was controversial at all. That guy was very touchable. So I'm gonna stand by that. That was
have a conversation.
Oh boy, this one.
Oh.
32:13.
Oh my goodness, you contradicted yourself. La 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 la.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So you strongly agree. You're cheating. You're off the line, but that's okay. You strongly agree, and you strongly agree. What would it take you to move to the agree line? Let me go for. I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3 because I haven't.
You asked me this already, and I told you nothing.
Okay. What would it take you to move to the agree line?
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Would you say absolutely nothing or nothing?
Absolutely nothing. I just said what I had to say.
Okay.
I would be willing to revise my opinion with, new information that comes out, new studies, new statistics, saying if there is actually a true advantage that trans women have over cis women in sports. But as of right now, there's nothing that is prominent, like as in what we know, that would change my position right now.
Why do you think you should be the one to facilitate this conversation when you don't even care about sports?
I know nothing about sports.
Yeah, so you don't care about sports. So why?
Well, that's not
Do you
entirely true.
Do you care about trans women and trans
Well, wait a second.
rights?
Let me answer your question first. I actually happen to know a lot about one sport, but it's a very fringe sport.
But you don't care about sports. Sports.
Correct. I don't care about any sports with a ball.
Do you care about trans women?
What do you mean?
Do you care about trans women and trans women issues? And
Like, give me any. Like, what do you mean?
And protecting trans women. What do you mean? What do I mean? Answer. It's a straightforward question.
That's actually not a straightforward question.
Do you care about trans women? Do you care about the issues they face? Do you care about being a good ally to trans women? Do you care about trans women?
I was up with you until you used the word ally. I care about. So the answer to the first question is yes, and the answer
But
to
you're
the
not an ally
second
to
question,
trans women.
it depends what you mean.
It depends on what I mean by ally.
Yes.
What do you think ally means? As someone who's I'm not a leading top, some of you don't know what ally means, but someone in the field, what do you think ally means?
So let me just say, often we use words that we think we know what other people
I know
mean
what
by
the
them.
word ally means. I'm asking
Right,
ally
right.
because allies, an easy word to understand. Ally means
At your biblical age, are you
55.
biblical? Are you telling
What do you mean biblical?
it means you're older than the Bible? Do you really not know what ally means?
Not that old.
Do you really not know what ally means?
It depends what you mean. If you mean different people mean different things by ally.
then come back to me.
Like it doesn't mean somebody willing to. Yeah.
I'm asking you, what do you think? Like, what's your definition of ally?
Okay, I'm more than happy. Yes, I will answer that question. We'll go back to the claim. You have my word. I will answer that question. So I'm just going to wrap up. You have my word. So you guys, there's nothing to get you to change your mind, and absolutely nothing. I want to make sure clear. Is there anything that would get you two to move to the slightly, either to the strongly disagree or to the slightly disagree? Like, is there any piece of evidence that you would have to hear or reason or argument?
I think I would definitely be open to changing my opinion or even just hearing other people out.
So what would it look like for you to move to, you have to play by the rules of the game, which means you have to stand on a line. Yeah. So what would it take for you to move to the slightly disagree? Evidence, reason, data, like what would that look like?
I'm not sure, but I would like to note that I think for a trans woman to compete in women's sports, she has a biological advantage. And then for a trans man to compete in men's sports, she has a biological disadvantage. So I just want to make that point that I do think that's something to consider. And I don't agree with attacking people personally, whether it's that he's old or that I'm sitting here smiling. I don't think that anything to do with this conversation has to do with how you treat other people. And if you're going to sit here and say you accept all people, then you need to sit here and accept all people.
I did not say I accept all people. I don't accept bigots. I don't accept racists.
Old people.
Yeah, old people like you because you're an ass. I accept older people who are open-minded, like my parents, per se, who are actually older than you. And I accept people who are willing to actually open their minds up.
I'm confused. I just said I'm very open-minded. Okay.
So you accept, you're accepting of people who are willing to open their minds, but yet you are not willing to open your mind for evidence that would take you to go to the agree line.
I'm not willing to open my mind to be a bigoted piece of shit, no.
That's that for that clip.
I actually hadn't seen that one. Oh my god.
Really?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that one. I feel like Peter Boghossian is the new Jerry Springer. That's cool.
When I saw that, I
Wow.
lost sleep that night. That was so cringe. I had nightmares.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Oh.
All right. Questions about those clips?
Yeah, so they're very different again. I'd like to know whether you thought both of those things were either street epistemology or attempting street epistemology.
I bet there was an attempt, and I want to say
On both?
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the second one. I'm
For both,
almost
yeah.
forgotten about the first one because the second one is hitting me so hard. So in terms of the second one, I think he was attempting it, and I think he was a swing and a miss. I think he was arguing for a position really sort of obviously and engaging that kind of defensiveness that blocks people's ability to look at their underlying epistemology.
And the first one? Anthony?
Oh, yeah, Anthony, yes.
That was straightforward SE.
Yeah, that was good.
Yep.
Everyone else agree with Dali there?
Yeah, I think that I'm pretty critical of Peter's recent attempts in the field, but I didn't feel like there was anything that he was saying or doing in that particular clip that felt like he couldn't be said to have at least been attempting to do SE in that video. Yeah.
Consent to what, Daniel? Please clarify. But I think Pete, and I was there for that, tour. I think we were trying to achieve multiple things. We were trying to use SE in a group setting, which is more experimental. We don't usually do it in groups, but we were trying to help people reflect on the quality of their reasons for being on whatever line they're on. And we, expected some things would happen, and they happened, and we got some good content out of that. So it's probably not ideal to model SE this way. It's usually best if it's one-on-one, but it has certain effects if you use it in that context.
So can I ask, because you all seem to agree that Anthony's clip was SE. There was nothing controversial about it. Everyone just says that's SE, right? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Wasn't anything I saw that made me think it wasn't. Yeah.
Oh, and the second one was an unusual setup in that it was several people, and it was a bit like a game show.
Yeah.
But despite that, was it SE? Would you say on balance or not?
It was hard to say because in the context of in the context of what the entire thing was, the whole video was trying to achieve, I don't think that was trying to achieve street epistemology. And the reason for that is I think that the focus of that content was the content itself. The focus of the video was the audience. It wasn't necessarily the people he was speaking to. It wasn't about the individuals. It was about people seeing how people respond to these kinds of questions in universities at the moment. And so I don't think he was attempting SE in the grand scheme of things. In that particular clip that we saw, there wasn't anything that Peter did or said that I felt made it not street epistemology. He seemed to be asking questions and genuinely listening to answers. He wasn't delivering messages. He wasn't contradicting or cutting people off. I didn't hear and these are all things I've seen him do, but in that clip, I didn't see him do any of that. It was just hard to watch for other reasons.
I think this is why I wanted to play that clip, because I have seen other clips with Peter, which I know that you would have said wasn't SE, because I know I've gathered that there are certain sort of things that you would say that now there he's made a mistake, or there that thing there that he did, he was combative, or there was some reason why. And I showed you that clip on purpose because I wanted to push you to see if you were being neutral about the reaction he was getting, or not. Because if you said that he was doing everything kind of by the book, as it were, in the sense that he was conducting himself according to SE, but the result was still going off the rails. My question to you is why do you think that is less of an SE conversation than Anthony's one?
It violates the avoid debate rule to set up a spectrum wherein you put people on lines and then have them argue against each other. I think that's what, for me, defines it as debate as opposed to SE. Now, when I say something's debate, that doesn't at all mean it's bad. I actually watch a lot of debate and really enjoy the heck out of it, and I think it's useful. Just because you're not making my recipe of cake doesn't mean you're doing bad baking. That I don't want to call it SE because of the no debate rule.
It's interesting though. It's a good point, but it wasn't Peter that was debating, was it?
No, not really.
No, he was setting up,
but he was inspiring it. Yeah,
right.
People and encouraging a debate between them.
I don't know if he was encouraging debate. They could have not addressed themselves at all. They could have been focusing on only what Peter was asking potentially. But it does sometimes get into.
He directly asked people on one side to come up with reasons that might move the people on the other side. And so for me, that qualifies as inviting debate.
But is that excluding?
No, did he do that?
That's not allowed. You're not allowed to do that if you're doing SE.
No. But again, look, when I in the video that I think you commented on, Steve, the critique I was making it Peter's approach in that video, which wasn't the one we just watched. It was the one that started this conversation. In that video, I wasn't. The one thing I can't do is know whether any of the people involved in that video went home, went to sleep, woke up the next morning in the shower, started to think about what was discussed, and in that moment, after the video and the camera's not there, started to honestly reflect on the reasons why they believe something. And so in that sense, I can't really know whether SE had been achieved, right? The goal, my view of the goal of SE had been achieved in that moment. But what I can do is I can say, based on what we know or we understand currently to be the effective practice of SE, I can say whether there are, much of which, by the way, Peter has had a huge say in. We talk about not delivering messages, for example. That comes from How to Have Impossible Conversations, and is a very clear thing that he says not to do, because it makes it much more difficult for your conversation partner to be feel unattacked in that moment, and yet he does that in those videos. So when we're criticizing those videos, we're not saying this is not SE per se. We're saying that this is currently not understood to be best practice as regards to what we currently understand the practice of SE to be. Just like somebody saying that's not good medicine. What that doctor did is not good medicine. And I know that because we've got a better understanding of what good medicine is now.
Okay.
So we're criticizing the practice, just to be clear.
So would you say that Peter was doing SE, but just not well, or not correctly?
I don't think he was attempting SE, because I think the content he was making was for the video, not for the people he wasn't attempting SE with the people he was speaking to. It felt to me that he was attempting, if anything, to create some content that inspired other people to reflect after they watched it. That may be the case, and so perhaps that was what was going on.
These can be both true at the same time. He was attempting.
Oh, totally.
It, and
Yeah.
then,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the root of it is still, for me, is that it seems a little bit subjective around what you're kind of judging things, whether they're SE or not, by the, not so much the method, because I think you were saying it's more than a method, but by the outcome.
So that there's an objective, and then there's what we're trying to do, and then there's the method, which is how we go about doing it. And we can critique the method in relation to our understanding of its efficacy in achieving the goal. Yeah.
The outcome is out of, to some extent, out of the control of the SEer.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
And that's all I'm really picking up on, is that you seem to be saying that Peter wasn't doing SE in certain situations where, because the outcome was perhaps not what you would have wanted.
Yeah, by the end of that, it was no longer civil. I would
yeah.
And if that's part of this longer definition that we have in the module 1 of what is SE,
yeah,
like this is something you would use if you wanted to study SE. These are the criteria you would go with.
Can I just put one more thought experiment to you? I suppose it's like an analogy, or I don't know if is it called an outsider test? I'm not up on all the
outsider test. It might be. Yeah.
I'll put it to you, because I think it gets to what I'm getting at here. Right. So the stand-up comedian has a job to do, and let's say that their job is to make as many people laugh for as much as possible during their set.
Mm-hmm.
They're all sat in the audience. There's nothing weird going on. They're not giving them drugs or anything. It's just by talking, just by telling jokes. And so let's say that's how you measure whether a stand-up comedian is good or not so good. Okay.
Yeah, the laughometer. Yeah.
And the analogy, of course, is that we want to just see if there's a competing problem in how they're delivering this stuff, which is the analogy to SE. Right. So let's say that in order to get more people to laugh, the comedian has to go to slightly more controversial topics in order to do that. But the danger is that if you push that too much, someone's going to get offended. All right. Now, let's say in an audience of 1,000 people, the comedian comes up with material and 0 people walk out of that performance. Nobody leaves their seat. They all sit there for the whole performance, but there's only a little bit of laughter every now and then. It's not that much laughter going on. But then another comedian comes onto the stage, and by the end of the performance, 20 people have left the room because they're offended. But there's a lot of laughter in the room. And all I'm trying to set up here is a scale whereby at one end, nobody leaves the room, but there's not that much laughter. And on the other end, No, I'm going to make it a bit more realistic. At the other end of the scale, everybody leaves the room, all right? But what I'm trying to say is there's a sweet spot that you can move that slider, and then to maximize the amount of laughter for the most people. But let's just say that sweet spot still means that 5 people leave the room.
This is very much why we don't like doing SE with more than one person, or why personally the conversation method that we practice is not very effective with multiple people, because everybody is in a different place. Just like with you, I think this is a great analogy, by the way. This is brilliant, because not everybody finds the same kind of humor funny, right? Everybody's got their own taste in comedy. So what is hilarious to one person is completely gibberish and boring to somebody else. And so the reality is when you're having a one-to-one conversation with another person, you really want to be empathetic. You want to try to understand them, and you want to tailor your conversation so that it can be engaging for the person you're speaking to. And therefore, we can't run on a set script. You can't just have a series of set questions that you ask somebody and expect to have the same outcome. You have a framework for the conversation for sure, but you basically want to empathize with the person. You want to use their definitions. You want to use their understanding. And then you want to meet them where they seem to be in that conversation. And that could be that they want to get really edgy. They want to get really controversial. They want to explore darker themes. Or maybe they've never really thought about this and they're very open and they're just kind of or feeling maybe attacked, or maybe they feel like nervous about the conversation. So you want to be aware of that in every moment. So yeah, doing this live means responding to that person's sense of comedy in real time. It's a comedian trying to adapt their stand-up routine in real time for an audience of one.
Yeah, I think what I'm really getting at, and I probably haven't made myself very clear, is with this analogy is that you can pitch yourself as a street epistemologist where you're very gentle to the point where you don't upset anybody. So rapport is maintained, okay, at the one end of the scale.
Mm-hmm.
But you're sacrificing perhaps that because you're not pushing very hard, you're sacrificing the fact that they may just not be challenged to think about anything.
But could we agree that the best comedian in this situation is one that makes everybody laugh uproariously and nobody leaves offended?
No,
that would be the ultimate peak.
Yeah, but that's in an imaginary world. In the real world,
of course. But we can have that theoretical objective without necessarily knowing how we would get there. Right?
We can, but we could still have to admit that. In my analogy, we have to admit that there's a sweet spot on that scale, but it's not zero. It isn't zero. People
you're allowed to sacrifice rapport for reflection.
What I'm saying is, in the real world, let's put it this way: instead of 1,000 audience members, there's 1,000 conversations.
Sure.
And let's say that 5 of those go off the rails, and those people just walk off.
I want 50.
Right. My point is, it's a discussion around how you conduct yourself, because it seems to me that one of the values of SE or one of the goals of SE is to keep the conversation polite and cordial.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
but that's because it's not effective without doing that, right? As in, it's more effective if you're maintaining rapport.
I understand that. But
if I could just agree with you for a moment, if I had the most polite civil conversation with you imaginable, and you walked away not having reflected but really thinking I'm a great guy, I definitely haven't achieved SE. There is that is not that I've failed to achieve my goal if all I've done is maintain rapport. And you could say, well, look, if I'd maintained only very superficial levels of reflection, if I'd induced superficial reflection at the expense of having to maintain good rapport for myself, where's the trade-off? What if I was to be a little bit more disagreeable? And in the SE community, we talk quite a bit about the idea of spending rapport, which is the idea that you've built up some sense of respectability with the person. Somebody, they know you're not trying to be a dick. They've kind of got a sense that you're trying to be a human being and you're trying to be honest and respectful, but you might ask them a little bit of a question that digs. And I think that that's a really interesting idea within the community and how we talk about when is it okay and not okay to spend rapport. And I personally feel like spending a little bit of rapport once you've earned it is really worthwhile. I think, but how you spend that rapport and when you choose to do so, and how confident you are that you've got enough of it to spend, is a genuinely lively conversation within the community. So I think, does that help at all?
That's a great answer. because I've been trying to get someone to say that. Because
I've lost
think
about 1 to 2% due to lost rapport, and that's too low. I'm shooting for 5%. I'm trying to spend rapport enough that I lose 1 in 20.
Because the reason I wanted to push that is only because, and I may not have seen enough conversations or enough reviews or maybe I just have seen the wrong reviews, because a lot of the reviews seem to be pushing on criticizing, say, Peter for perhaps losing rapport or being combative. But my question is, and now Reid, let me say, you've done some great videos. So I picked out one that wasn't your best one. I did that on purpose. I'm sorry to say that, but the one where you didn't get the guy to think and he kind of walked away. But most of your conversations are really gripping, and you do push and to varying amounts. But with this one, nothing really happened. He just kind of walked off.
Yeah.
And I think the point I'm trying to make there is the criticism it seems to be aimed at Peter for upsetting people or for being combative or whatever it is. But the criticism doesn't seem to be, I never see criticism saying, this is too gentle. Nothing happened here. Because what you could have done, there was a question, wasn't there? It was something like, can you change your body? Or what was it?
Can anyone be born in the wrong body?
Yeah, and there was a question, and you kind of let him slip away from that question. And you didn't say, no, let's just get back. If it was a Pine Creek, you just would have said, no, let's get back to the question. And I know why you didn't do it, because you're not like that. But I have seen you more like that. I've seen you be a little bit more pushy with like, for example, with astrology. That's the subject that seems to get you going.
True.
And
I could push all day with that.
At one time.
And I think what I'm trying to get to here is that I think there is a sweet spot on a scale. Get my fingers in there. There's a scale, a bit like the comedian, where some people walk out. There's a scale of how much rapport you maintain versus how much you push.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And
I
I just haven't heard that in your sort of debates about this. I've only seemed to have heard criticism of pushing too hard, which is the Peter thing, Peter Boghossian. He's pushing too hard, he's being too combative. But I haven't heard the other side where it's too gentle.
I think with Peter's videos, he wasn't building the rapport to begin with. I think that's one of the things that, and again, I think in the one that I definitely remember reviewing, the conversation, it wasn't about the individual, right? That was the main difference between this. He was talking to the people, but he was talking to the people for the camera. So he wasn't building rapport with the individuals. He wasn't trying to maintain a friendly demeanor. He wasn't, he came very abrasive from the outset. Now, if Pine Creek was just an arsehole to begin with, when he first set up his channel and he was just rude and obnoxious, he definitely would get an audience, I'm sure, but it wouldn't be the audience he has. And he wouldn't gain the respect from the wider community that he does. The reality is that he's built up a sense of credibility, and he has to maintain that credibility through being not dishonest. The moment he makes a cheap, nasty, pathetic, dirty move, I think he'll actually feel pretty miserable about that as much as everybody else criticizing him for it. So he has to maintain rapport with his audience as much as and himself as much as he does with the interlocutor. I think spending rapport is an important idea. You need to build a good relationship with that person very quickly in a very short space of time, so that you can then challenge them and ask them more difficult questions and maybe be a little bit more pushy. And I think if Reid had said to that person, had held him to that question about people being born in the wrong body, I don't think he would have not been doing SE. I don't think I would have called it out as saying, oh no, now you're not doing SE at that moment because you're being rude to that person. I don't think that would have changed it at all.
It doesn't have to be rude.
Exactly.
I've got one more thought experiment to throw at you, and then we can just open it up.
And one comment, like SE is already boring enough. If we reviewed a video where it was so polite, nothing happened, that would be even worse video. Why are we reviewing something boring? Encouraging people to,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got this thought experiment. I don't know if it's a thought experiment or if it's just an analogy, but it's called the rude psychiatrist. Okay. I'm just going to ask you some questions. Do you think it's logically possible for a psychiatrist to be rude?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think being polite or being rude is part of the definition of what it is to be a psychiatrist?
No.
Definition.
If the dictionary,
I don't know.
you look it up in the dictionary, would it mention being polite or rude?
I'm leaning towards yes, it is.
It's
more
part
polite
of the
than not rude.
It's part of the definition.
Leaning towards yes, maybe.
Okay. All right.
I don't know.
And then do you think that there's a scale of polite versus rude, and you can be more or less effective as a psychiatrist by getting the right point on that scale?
Yes.
I don't know. I still think we can say that the best possible outcome here is that you've got a very polite, effective psychologist or street epistemologist.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, there is a danger, and this is a genuine danger, and I think it's one of the things that SE pushes against, is there's a danger that if you allow yourself the move to be aggressive or preachy or push a point or spend that rapport very quickly before you've really earned it, if you allow that move, it will become more habitual. And then you're going to end up screaming and shouting at people because you think that they're wrong. And you go back to sort of the unhelpful way of having conversations. I think whilst a psychiatrist that basically goes in and just starts saying, cheer the hell up, sort yourself out, whatever, just berates his patients, is unlikely to be a very effective psychiatrist, right? They're not likely to get the job done very well. And so they clearly would have to build up a certain reputation and relationship with their patient before they can start pushing those more slightly aggressive prompts to try to encourage them to heal better, or whatever it is psychiatrists do. So yeah, I think saying there's a scale is slightly dangerous, because I think we need to aspire to being a fantastic psychiatrist that's incredibly effective without burning any rapport. Like, that would be the best trick if we could do it, and we should aspire to that. But I do think that if we have to and we need to, and it's necessary for us to be able to have an effective conversation to effectively meet our goal, I think we can spend some rapport points by asking a challenging question or disagreeably pulling somebody back to a question you've already asked that they seem to have not quite addressed. And I think that we can do that, providing we've got that rapport. And Anthony, I think in my recent conversation with him, said, and I think this is good, is that if at the end of that conversation that person would be unwilling to have a conversation with you again, then I think you've spent too much rapport. Yeah. And it's broken down. But if they're willing to, so if your patient as a psychiatrist is like, okay, that was really effective, but I'm never going to talk to that guy again, that was horrible, even though it helped me, I still don't want to talk to him, then clearly that's not right. That's clearly gone wrong. And so I think that you can spend rapport right up to that point, I'd imagine.
So can I just summarize that? You're saying that the extreme approach is wrong. So to be rude or to be combative would be just wrong and terrible. I agree with you. But are you saying that there isn't, well, I think you're saying that you can spend rapport, as you put it, but you just have to do it carefully.
Yeah,
and
I would say so.
So
spending rapport is the exception to the rule. Most of the time you're being very polite and kind, and sometimes you want to be selectively tough.
Because there's a difference between being overtly rude or combative and politely pushing for reasons, right? Because I think the
difference is often in the perception of the person listening, and maybe not in my intention.
Because I think the other there's one other thing. I think I might have mentioned it, but I think that there's a subjective objective issue here. And that how someone reacts is to an approach that you might take, the way that you ask a question. It can be very different. Different people react very differently.
I can
And
give you
so-
I can give you a pill that's been shown to be very effective for the condition that you seem to have, but you just happen to be allergic to it, and then you have a bad reaction to it. And that doesn't mean my intention for giving you the pill was wrong. It just means that you're right. People, everybody has to be treated as an individual, and one of the reasons why, again, we don't like to do these sort of en masse SE sessions is because actually you need to address people's individual spaces and mindsets.
So I think all I'm getting at really is some people that say Peter Boghossian would talk to wouldn't fly off the rail. They wouldn't get angry. They would maintain their composure, or they wouldn't take it personally. He could be exactly the same way with another person, and they would behave. They would get upset. I mean, we saw an example of that. They might even walk away.
I've seen SEers do really kind and wonderful things, and just the topic set the IL off.
Yeah,
Fine.
Yeah,
it happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I think what I'm trying to say is, I see a little bit in your definition. I think William especially, which is more about let's see how they react before we decide whether this is SE. And all I'm saying is
no. Okay. No, I disagree with that, but I very much understand why you think that. Yeah, why you might say that. Yeah, I think to a certain extent you're trying to achieve like the person is, if the person is unwell and you're attempting a treatment, you can say that the person was still trying to give them the treatment even if the treatment proved ineffective, right? Even if the person was not responding to this treatment, and they were responding really badly, right? And they ended up having an allergic reaction and died, right? Something really horrific happened. You could say, well, the doctor that was treating them was still trying to treat them, was still attempting to do something, but had been ineffective. So again, we have to differentiate between what the person is trying to achieve and whether or not they've achieved it or not. But those two things are separate. I can't control really whether I've achieved it or not. Nobody can, because it's very much you're right. It's very much down to the reaction the individual has. And they may or not be. We talk about doxastic openness, like the ability to be open to ideas and be aware of, open to the idea of challenging their thoughts and questioning their own beliefs, as opposed to being doxastically closed, which is just brick wall, la la la, I'm not listening. And if you're talking to somebody who's doxastically closed, you really might need to address your strategy differently. You might need to approach the conversation differently to somebody who's clearly open and willing to engage in the conversation. So I think this is all about the fact that you're attempting to have that change happen. You can't control for sure whether it definitely does, just like the doctor can't guarantee that the pill will make the person better. They just know that it's been shown and demonstrated to be effective in a majority of cases, and that they are monitoring the situation to make sure that they notice if there is a bad reaction, and then they'll immediately do something to correct it and respond in that situation. And I think that that's what we're trying to do in SE. We're trying to have that effect, that really good effect of causing somebody to do some honest self-analysis. But I think in trying to do that, we may get it completely wrong, even though we're attempting to do it. Sorry, I missed that one. What was that?
I don't know. Distracting.
Isn't everybody on this panel a brick wall regarding the existence of God? A brick wall.
I don't know about Steve's position. He hasn't disclosed his.
I have no idea.
This is not what we're talking about right now.
Should we watch one more clip and then we can maybe wrap up? Or
yeah, sure. Very happy to.
There's another one lined up here. I think it's.
By the way, I just want to re-point out, I'm really loving this conversation, Steve, and I think all these questions are fantastic. And I really do mean that. I think these are great questions. I really appreciate it.
The awkward pauses one?
Pine Creek. Yes, that's the one.
And that's.
It's a little bit longer, but I think it's worth watching.
He's going to start charging us a licensing fee for this stuff, that he's definitely that would be a.
But so I'm a
6:55. Did I get the right one? I think so. All right.
Yep.
All right. This is 8 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Since we're kind of struggling let's put it as a new one. Healings. I like that one. Okay, we got 4 now. Let's stick with 4. Okay, so now if let's take the last one first, healings. If every healing that you ever saw, either to yourself, with yourself, or other people, if let's say half of them were faked, fake's a strong word, but wasn't from God. It wasn't from the devil either. It was just people, thinking things in their own head. Would you leave Christianity? Would your confidence in Christianity drop to the point where you say, "No, what? I'm not a Christian anymore. This is all bunk," probably. If half of the okay. What about if 90% of the healings that you saw, you became convinced this is just psychosomatic, it's emotional drivel, it didn't actually come from God? Would you leave Christianity? If 90%?
No.
Okay. So let's go to the next one.
Okay.
Inerrant text. Let's say you became convinced next year that
I actually don't have a notepad. Is it okay if I grab one really quick so I can
go ahead.
write?
Sure.
I'll take you with me.
Oh, Reid, welcome. He's in the live stream chat. I'm trying to do strict SE here, Reid, but in a little different, my own spin. Of course. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, I'm just gonna. Am I staticky right now? I move my mic. Sometimes it happens like that.
You're okay.
This is actually okay. So I'm in the process of moving right now, and I don't know where a lot of stuff is. So just for the sake of your viewers and for the sake of time, I will just try and remember and suffer through. I'm already in the lion's den. Can't get much worse.
Okay, so we talked about healings as a reason. I'm going backwards here. Inerrant texts you mentioned. If you became convinced that some of the texts, the copies that we have, are, if you became convinced that there were contradictions that could not be harmonized to your satisfaction, would your confidence in Christianity go down?
Like I said, foundationally, no. There. I don't think there are contradictions that cannot be rationalized.
Okay, got it.
So,
Let's say,
I guess in a pretend world, from that perspective, if the Bible could be proven wrong, factually, historically, whatever, then from that point of view, yes, you would have to. A Christian from that standpoint,
not necessarily. So let's say it says in the Bible that I can't think of a good example off the top of my head. It's getting late, but let's say the Bible says a certain place was east of another place, but it was actually west. So it was
okay. So no, nothing, not indiscrepancies like that.
Okay.
There is nothing that the Bible teaches or affirms foundationally incorrect to. You might have differences, like I said, in the text we have today and the translations we have. You're going to find discrepancies here and there of little things like that. But
let's go a little bit deeper with this inerrant text reason. Let's say you became convinced this time next year, that some of the things Jesus is reported to have said in the Gospel of John, you became convinced, no, Jesus never said that at all. Whether you're right or wrong, you just became convinced that, no, Jesus never said those things. And would your confidence in Christianity lower to the amount where you would give up Christianity if you became convinced that Jesus didn't say some of the things in the Gospel of John?
You're going to have to clarify that, because we're kind of doing this from a presuppositional standpoint. It is me presupposing the ideas that you're presenting, but
in other words,
it's all what ifs.
Yes, it's all.
If that makes sense.
We're trying to figure out what's the primary reason for why you're a Christian, and so all these questions are going to be what if questions. So, what if you became convinced that some of the things that Jesus is reported to have said and done actually didn't happen? Would your confidence in Christianity lower? And if so, would it lower enough for you to leave Christianity?
I couldn't be. That's such a. See, this is such a hard conversation for me because it's from the standpoint of basically what would make me become an atheist.
No,
because if I was or go into a different religion or so on or so forth. Because
it's like you could say, for example, you could say, yeah, my confidence would lower, Doug, if that happened, but I would still be a Christian because of a different reason. Or you could say, yes, Doug, my confidence would lower, and that would be enough for me to leave Christianity because then I don't know what to trust. Or you could say, I don't think my confidence would lower at all because we're not talking about the originals, Doug. We're talking about copies. And so if something was wrong, then it's wrong. So I just laid out 3 options for you. Do any of them resonate with you?
Again, it's more so in this idea of what if. If the Bible was ever proven 100% factually incorrect in what it teaches and what it affirms, I think the honest thing to do would be to leave Christianity. To be quite, if Jesus was disproven, I think the honest thing to do would be to do that. But it's never happened, and it's never going to. There are, I think, plenty of people that think it has been and believe it has been, but there's always a rationalization for every argument.
We'll get into deeper. I'm just trying to figure out what's the main reason for you. What about prophecy? Let's say you became convinced. I don't know. There's 300 messianic prophecies or so forth. Let's say you became convinced a year from now that the prophecy of Tyre actually is a bad prophecy. Would that lower your confidence enough to leave Christianity, do you think?
No, because it's not foundational to the it's not foundational to the message. It's not foundational to.
Got it.
The Bible from Genesis to Revelation is Jesus centered.
What about if you gave me a list of your top 10 prophecies, and a year from now, all 10 of them you became convinced they're not good prophecies. They're probably not prophecies at all. Would you leave Christianity?
No.
Okay. So you see how quickly you answered that compared to the inerrant text? That tells me that...
I'm more so just kind of getting into the flow of where the conversation's going, not necessarily for any other specific reason.
Okay, what about your experiences? And let's not go specific. Let's just keep your experiences. Think. Don't say it out loud, but think in your mind the most powerful experience of God or Jesus you've ever had, or the most powerful experience of demons or whatever, supernatural you've ever had in your life. Let's say a year from today, you became convinced that none of that came from the supernatural realm, that it was other factors. And we don't have to even guess what that might be at this point. But think of the most powerful experience you ever had of God, Jesus, demons. And if it were true that that had nothing to do with the supernatural realm, would you leave Christianity?
No, I would not.
Okay, that's interesting. So that tells me that I think the one that we should focus on is the inerrant texts.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm good with whatever. Okay. I wish I had some of my notes in front of me, but it's okay. I'll do.
And I think that's that for that one.
Anyone want to give me some feedback on whether you thought that was SE?
I think that was SE. That was one technique of SE, the real reason check, for a bunch of reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one little section in the process.
That was the most SE I've seen Pinecrete do.
Really?
Deliberately on scripts SE.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Okay. And I'll just tell you this. I'm not going to reveal too much about my opinions, but I will say that I picked that last clip because I thought it was, and obviously it didn't show the beginning or the end, but I thought that was in the sweet spot of SE, in my understanding of what SE either is or maybe could be. Can you talk me around whether I'm right?
Yeah, I definitely felt like there were a few moments where I think he phrased things. He could have phrased things better to make it a little bit less combative. I can't. As I was listening, there was just a few things that I was thinking. Oh, you know, that's that could have definitely been presented better. But essentially, the pattern that he was following, the approach he was taking, was really good. I mean, I didn't think that was bad. It was great. It's a great way of exploring people's views, to try to make sure that person, the reason the person is giving is a core reason, a trunk reason, a foundational reason. Because a lot of street epistemologists, when they're starting to learn this, they get stuck in the branches of people's epistemologies. The sort of, there's a trunk belief, there's a sort of core set of reasons why somebody usually believes something, and then there's a whole load of sort of related but not as important beliefs that sort of branch out from that. And a lot of street epistemologists spend an awful lot of time whacking away at the leaves and branches, and none of it's really important to the person you're speaking to. So trying to get to a core claim is really important, and I think he did a good job of doing that. Especially with the conversation partner that was clearly, they've been speaking for a little while, and it was good. I thought it was good.
I think what I picked out from that, and what I've picked out from other SE talks that I thought went well, was that there was a kind of a kicking of the tires going on. Like, he was pushing, he was challenging, but he managed to keep the rapport, I thought, in that situation. But the thing that made it impressive, I thought, was there was a systematic quality to it. It wasn't just a scattergun, let's push your ideas. There was a kind of, he worked through the main, I think it was 4 or 5 main reasons that he believed in Christianity. I forget, but and so he established that. He said, right, let's start by what are your top 5 reasons or whatever. And then he systematically worked through each one. And I thought what was interesting about that was he was guiding his interlocutor through their own system of belief and helping them to break it down in order to uncover the main fundamental reason. And I've seen Anthony do that as well. I've seen Reid do that. And I just wonder if you think that is one of the roots of successful SE is this ability to be able to systematically guide someone through their epistemology. So it's about not just challenging the epistemology generally, but it's about working through it in a systematic way in order to pick out the one nugget, maybe the sort of foundation stone. And then when you've isolated that what that is, that's almost like one of the goals. That's really what you're aiming to do. That's a sign of a successful conversation.
Yeah, that's the path to get to the actual epistemology. If you're dealing with reasons that are superficial, you're not going to. When you ask why, you're going to get another reason. When you ask that fundamental reason, you're going to get a category of reason to believe, like an epistemology. And so,
we're prioritizing the epistemology people are most persuaded by for their particular claim, I guess. Like, you could have a good conversation about all of those kinds of reasons about that claim, potentially, but is it actually the thing that's actually propping up his confidence? Those are the things that we like to focus on.
Yeah, and if you do get to that core claim, of course, then it would invalidate all of the branches from that tree trunk, right? So if you were to cut down the tree trunk, then you don't need to address all the branches, because they're only there because the tree trunk belief is holding them up. Like, if he stopped believing in the divinity of Jesus, for example, the chances of him also believing that Jesus was resurrected and Jesus conducted the miracles, or the Bible is literally true, all of that would fall on the basis of him no longer believing in the divinity of Jesus. And so if he had a root belief in the divinity of Jesus, then that would be the thing to explore. But quite oftentimes in conversations with people, you do end up in these kinds of very complex ideas, because I think for a lot of people, beliefs and ideas are complicated. They're nebulous. They kind of affect it. They have sort of tendrils that sort of spring out and go all over the place. And so when they're just articulating these views and they're trying to think, why do I believe this, or what does this mean to me? They're sort of working through their mental models themselves. And they're not really aware of what the core epistemology is, and it's not dishonest of them to try to start talking about all these other things that are connected to this idea. It's just really how their mental models are structured, and they're working back themselves to say, okay, actually, and this is why this question is really good. If this wasn't true for whatever reason, if we could demonstrate this wasn't true, would this stop you believing it? And if you get to a claim like that, then that's worth spending time on.
So would it be fair to say that one of the goals of street epistemology was to encourage your conversation partner to investigate their hierarchy of reasons or hierarchy of epistemology?
Definitely, yeah.
Yes.
To get to the kind of base
exploring
level.
that for sure.
Okay.
I mean, just doing that would be SE. Just even getting them to notice that there is a hierarchy of reasons that they believe something would be achieving the goal, right? That is encouraging them to reflect on their reasons, right? They're already that's enough of a goal. That's certainly a good enough starting point. So now we could talk about perhaps degrees of success, right? A high degree of success would be that they would abandon a belief that was poorly epistemologically established and maybe harming them, and no longer and have better tools to be able to explore similar beliefs in the future if they encounter them. That sort of inoculates them from adopting bad beliefs again in the future. I mean, that would be the highest sort of pinnacle of success. But interestingly, if you have that goal, you don't actually have to have an opinion about what the bad belief is. Which is what leads to this confusion that sometimes street epistemology is still just promoting atheism. It doesn't matter to me whether the person comes away not believing in God. If I talk to a theist, it's not important to me that they abandon the religion. What's important to me is that they have good epistemological reasons for believing what they believe. And if that ends up concluding in atheism, then okay. But if I'm wrong about atheism, if my reasoning is poor, then I can't have set the goal to believe what I believe. It's much more useful that they have a strong epistemological thinking machinery, that they're able to do this work for themselves and get to these conclusions, because that inoculates them against even my own bad beliefs. So critical thinking is a tool that gets you to good answers, regardless of whether they're the same answers as me or not. I think that's pretty important.
Yeah. Faith, revelation, and personal experience are unfalsifiable, non-public things usually, and that will lead to conflict when you're wanting something to be a certain way in society. And then at a certain point, the conversation stops, and that will lead to violence. So ideally, we want to be able to check our claims publicly and work together to get there, to get closer to a more rational confidence level for whatever.
Also, if somebody has a belief and they check their epistemology and they find their epistemology is bad, doesn't mean their belief is wrong. I could believe that aspirin is good for me because it's natural, and then realize that that's a bad reason to select aspirin over ibuprofen, but then believe aspirin, I might look for a better reason and actually find that aspirin is really good for me for a better reason, and then I will be more sure that aspirin is good for me, and I will be able to choose my medicines more carefully. It's not about changing the belief in the claim itself. It's about being better at forming proper beliefs,
reasons for beliefs.
I think you should. I think, you know what, as I'm thinking about this, I think you shouldn't need to hold on to your beliefs. I think if you have to work at holding on to your beliefs, that's a problem. I think you should just have no reasonable reason yet to let go of them. And I think that's what I want to do. I want to have just everything I believe, I want to be able to let go of if there's a reason to let go of it. I don't want there to be a belief that I hold. I'm having to just, the only reason I hold it is that I'm having to put effort into it by denying something or ignoring the cognitive dissonance of conflicting information. I think there are lots of people that do have beliefs that they have to work at holding on to. And I don't think that they tend to be helpful or good for them. And so I think it's useful. I think that's why SE is effective. I think SE is very effective in that space.
Great. Okay. Well, has anyone got anything else they want to bring up at this point?
You have so passed my.
No, it was a really fun conversation. I really enjoyed it.
I so want to have more conversations with you, Yorick. Welcome anytime.
I'll come back. Sure. If you
100%. 100%.
You want an outsider's perspective?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe we could do an SE review show on my
one of the
spectrum convo I did about abortion. That would be fun. We can do that this week.
Say again?
Yeah, I would like to. I looked for that and I couldn't find it actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Reid did a conversation that used the similar sort of visual scale representation on the topic of abortion. So yeah, I did look for that. For some reason, I couldn't see it on the channel, but maybe I was just being blind. One thing I did want to say though is as an outsider, Steve, like I tend to find a lot of people. I tend to find a lot of people that are in this position where they're just like coming to SE and looking at it and thinking about it and sort of. I think SE attracts people with a skeptical mindset, and so the first thing that's going to happen is people are going to be skeptical of SE. Right? People are going to be looking at this and saying, "What is it? Like, why are they? What is this? Is it a cult? Is it brainwashing? Is it a personality thing? Is it what is at the heart of it? Is it effective?" And it's honestly taken me about two years to get to be fairly confident with the idea that actually SE is something that has good intentions and genuinely. It seems to have something, and I think the definition is a challenge still, and we talk about it a lot, and it's clearly been a challenge for the people creating the course material for Module 1, defining what SE actually really is, and when you can say that is SE and that isn't SE, and how you say that's been tough, and it's something that the community has been really working on, and I think it's the openness and honesty with which it's been working on that problem that has given me confidence that this is something that it's worth me spending some time on. But I totally understand your reticence and your questions, and yeah, I think it's great.
I mean, I hope you've gathered that I'm not just a critic. I thought most of what you're doing is really interesting and positive. It's not that I'm against SE. It's just that I'm a bit unsure what your goals are sometimes, or how you're defining it.
So, Steve, question on falsifying SE. Yeah. What information could you learn?
We're not talking about that right now. We're about to wrap up. We don't be distracted by the chat. There's tons of topics in the chat.
Anyway, it's great to talk to you all.
Yeah.
You too, Steve. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll come back anytime.
The chat's been amazing. So thanks for being lively, chat. There has been way too much stuff to cope with, but it's been great.
All right.
Alrighty. Thank you.
See you all later.